Some of you may remember a while back I was sent a copy of Studio Hermitage's Our Brilliant Ruin, and I showed a quick sneak peek of this, and it's something I've been meaning to get back to, and I finally had a chance to do it. So I wanted to go over this and look at the book. Normally I do most of my stuff off PDF because it's easier for me to read, it's easier for me to share, I don't have as much to deal with the cameras. Even when I am playing or running the game, PDFs just make it easier for me. However, I do love hard copy books. There's a reason I've got shelves of them back there, there's more in another room, and hopefully more being added there soon. I did get the collector's edition of the book, and I wanted to go through this again and look at it. This is a gorgeous cloth cover book. It's embossed throughout. Beautiful gold inlay on the cover for the graphics and text. Inside the book, you'll see here there's a little bit of an inscription, but also we have these embossed pages, and they're telling a story. There was design choices made here that in the beginning, we have these green embossed cover pages. And at the back end of the book, they're black and embossed. Remember, the title of this book is Our Brilliant Ruin. You're headed toward something not good. So this makes perfect sense. The pages themselves, this is not the cheap gold plate gilding that we've seen in some books. It is definitely the highest quality I've seen for gilding in a long time for gilded pages, and such a thick quality of paper. It is high gloss, which I know some people don't enjoy. Sometimes it can make it harder to read depending how the light hits it, but I have no trouble reading this book. The design throughout is gorgeous. I just flip through here a little bit and share it with you. Now, you can definitely tell from reading this book that it's got Justin Achilles' stamp of approval all over it. You can see the DNA from the world time spent in the. You can see the DNA and the history from the time spent with the World of Darkness here. You start with fiction, you move into the rules, and it is a well thought out, well-defined world. Now, I loved that about World of Darkness, and I enjoy it here as well. Of course, my concern is always, hey, this is really cool, but I want to play in my world, not necessarily someone else's world. And even if I use the basis here from this book, running into those players that have gone and memorized everything, and then trying to run and say, yeah, but we're going to do it differently here, has proven to be a challenge in dealing with games that have an overwhelming meta in the past. It's proven to be a challenge for me. So the core idea of this setting and of this game is that ruin is coming to the world. In the meta story, this has already started. And the royals and the powers that be, the people in charge, have either already succumbed to it or kind of disappeared. And overall, they said, we're just not going to deal with this. We're going to keep living our lives, which now pits the player characters as pivotal between the ruins that are coming to the world and the rest of the world. Will they spur on the destruction? Or will they save, if not the world, at least their community, right? So I mentioned before that this is kind of a decadent Victoriana type setting, which is not usually the setting that I enjoy. It's not a genre that I enjoy. It just doesn't speak to me. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with that genre. It's just It's not typically for me. However, they've made this setting unique enough that it is very interesting. The world is crumbling. And yes, within the estates and some, finer areas, everything may still have that decadent look, but as soon as you step outside, you're back dealing with the fact that everything is crumbling. Everything is ruined and falling apart. Everything's kind of got a bit of a patina on it. And they do a really good job of explaining this in the book as you're reading both the fluff descriptions, if you will, as well as the short prose that they've littered throughout the book. So when you look at the inspirations for this game, the first thing named is Downtown Abbey, and the American counterpart, Gilded Age. They also mention Game of Thrones, and then they start mentioning not necessarily specific pieces, but the works of those like Edgar Allan Poe, E. Nesbit, T. Kingfisher. They're trying to bring this all together in a pretty neat little package. Like, each of these things stands well enough on its own. But what if we took a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B and we bring them together and you end up with something unique at the end of it, which I think they've done a tremendous job with here. So what's interesting here is while your characters might typically be considered rebels on the outside, here they are actually members of aristocratic society. They are the aristocrats. However, it's not the same aristocracy that has existed for a century and millennia beforehand. A lot of this is kind of upstart new blood rule. And they each belong to a specific house, and those houses will have certain things they are known for. House Bellefigne, for example, is known for being cocksure and blustering and hypercritical. One of the things that players will do early on is establish their estate. This is different than Dungeons & Dragons Bastions or a Stronghold. It's similar in that, hey, this is our domain, but it could be, a college campus. It could be a mansion. It could be an apartment. It's really just, this is where we have the most control. And so for that reason, this is going to be kind of pivotal to have that estate early on. It's going to be where the characters can rest, recharge, plan, research, and a lot of action's probably going to take place there because the game does have a lot of social aspects. When you consider what the ruin in Our Brilliant Ruin is, it can be very reminiscent of those going back to World of Darkness and talking about the worm. It is something that's kind of pervasive and supernatural almost. It kind of invades everything and seeps through everything. I think what's interesting is when they talk about dealing with the ruin and ways to overcome it. Of course, there's physical damage, physical combat, but also fire. It makes sense. And alcohol. The stronger the alcohol, the better, right? So you might look at some pretty strong whiskey, but something like witch hazel would be a lot more effective. Now, when it comes to the characters that you're going to play in Our Brilliant Ruin, there's really kind of two sides, right? There's the aristocrats, the social elite. I mentioned those earlier, where it's not just the traditional aristocratic, monarchy or hierarchy that we might be used to. A lot of it's upstart. And there is also the true folk faction, which is really the laborers, the scholars, those who aren't aristocrats but hold important places in society. And the important place might be the guy who keeps the lights on. Let's think about that, right? I think that for a lot of players, a lot of game masters, looking at this game, there's going to be, I don't want to say necessarily political intrigue. Yeah, that's going to be there. The phrase I'm looking for is I think there's going to be a lot of allegory and satire in games we see being run with this, which isn't a bad thing. I just think that that's something we're going to end up seeing a lot of. Now, for some groups, that's going to mean stay away from it. For other groups, that's going to mean dive headlong into this, you're going to love it. Your mileage may vary, right? The right game for the right table. There is also a third option for factions, unbonded. You aren't the aristocrat, you aren't the true folk, you are truly an outsider by your own choice, typically. And so you hold no loyalty to one side or the other. One thing that's going to be different here in this TTRPG from a lot of other role-playing games is that your attributes are really all mental. Mental and social, really. They are actually all considered personality attributes, and they run from audacity and benevolence to ingenuity and loyalty and sensitivity. You don't have things like strength or dexterity or constitution or vitality in the attributes. This is all about how you approach things and how you deal with things. So that's a little bit interesting. It typically is ranked from 1 to 3, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So there's still 9 attributes, which, should remind us of another role-playing game or storytelling game, you might say, that I've mentioned a couple times already. And then it goes into skills. And this is where you're going to get things like fight and craft and intuit. I'm just reading over kind of a small list of it here. The skills can be ranked from 0, no skill at all, up to 3. So we're also dealing with smaller numbers here than we might be used to, so something to keep in mind. As far as the number of skills, there are craft, express, fight, foster, intrigue, intuit, observe, transgress, physicality. It looks like, about 9 skills. So 9 attributes, 9 skills. And then you have portfolio. This is going to include things that you can't do. It's not your attributes, it's not your skills, it's things on the outside. Things you have command or control over. And this would include things like information or a mentor or an entourage. Reminds me of yet another game. These might have been called backgrounds. So again, a very different game than what we might be used to. There is actually a portfolio here for wardrobe, having just the right outfit at hand to accomplish a given task. From there, you go on to determine your character's vitality and distress. Vitality basically being your physical health, distress being your mental well-being, right? So if things stress you out or attack you mentally somehow, your distress is going to come into play. If you physically take damage, whether it be from poison or falling or fighting, that's going to be vitality. Dice mechanics is where you start to see the character of the game itself. Our Brilliant Ruin is based on D6 dice pools. Should come as no surprise that for the most part you're going to have your personality trait rated 1 through 3 and your skill trait rated 0 to 3. You're going to take a number of D6 equal to those two added together and roll those. 6s are successes essentially, and 1s are failures. 2, 3, 4, 5 are no effect. But here is where the game starts to come in on its own, and it starts to detach itself from other games. It doesn't call a 6 a success and a 1 a failure. Instead, it calls a 1 a gloom and a 6 a brilliant. And basically, you only need 1 brill to succeed. However, if you have more gloom than you do brills, you're going to have some sort of negative consequences. Now, rolling additional brills can do things like become a triumph, which then impacts your passion. So if you've achieved 3 brills, it's kind of weird to explain without skipping ahead and explaining passions. So characters in Our Brilliant Ruin have this kind of unique metagame currency they can use called passion. And basically that's your drive, your willingness to succeed and push beyond and dig down deep, right? So if you decide to apply passion to a roll, you get additional dice and more chances for success on a roll. But you add a passion die. If you max out at 5 passion, you're going to end up having to roll those dice on your next straight. You're spent. You're emotionally and just everything is drained. And something bad is going to happen. Remember, the ruin is pervasive and flowing through everything and all around you. So this makes sense thematically. The idea is, though, if you get 3 brills on a challenge, you can remove one of those dice from your passion pool. Why I said it would be a little bit hard to explain without jumping ahead. So there's a bunch of little subsystems in here that play together. I think it's pretty neat. Some of it is very familiar. Some would take some getting used to and some more reading on my part. There is definitely a lot more to dig into with Our Brilliant Ruin. I haven't even talked about the silo-kinetics or silo-kinetics. I may be wording that wrong, but these are kind of like, man, I'm trying to think how to describe it. They're giant mechanized units that float through the sky and can terrorize or even benefit communities. They're from a bygone era. They become a large plot device available for your games. And while the game is definitely motivated toward role-playing and the political intrigue and personal interactions, there's a lot of rules on exploration as well, which I find interesting, so I have to go back and read some of that. Your idea here is to kind of try and override or overcome or hold back this all-encompassing bleakness. You're trying to hold everything back and hold everything together and be a little shining beacon in the world. And that also leads into the estates, that, remember, that community kind of hub you and the other players have. And there's a whole subset of rules just based on that alone, maintaining and improving and kind of controlling that estate arena. Overall, looking at Our Brilliant Ruin, I think people who are fans of the Old World of Darkness system are going to be fans of this system. I also think that people who are fans of Ars Magica are going to like this because of the style of play that it is. It is not a dungeon crawl. It is not an action-adventure like Feng Shui or even Rifts and Palladium. It is definitely quite intentional in encouraging role play and telling more cerebral stories, and I think that's going to lend very well to players who enjoy the political machinations and the role-playing aspect of tabletop role-playing games. Definitely interested in taking a closer look at this. If you guys would like to hear more about it, let me know. I'm happy to go through some more of it. I think the team has done a tremendous job here. Now, I have included a link to the PDF of the main book down below. It is free, something you can get from DriveThruRPG, so there's a link for that below. And also be sure to check out the Our Brilliant Ruin website itself directly. I encourage more people to take a look at this and go over there and give the team at Studio Hermitage. Hey, until I see you guys again, remember to be well, be safe, be awesome, both to yourself and one another.